Hello and welcome to the Humans versus Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Dan Haylett. Now, this episode is one I'm extremely excited about. It's a lay on the couch therapy session, as I'm delighted to welcome licensed clinical psychologist and co-founder of Shaping Wealth, Dr. Joy Lere. Joy, welcome to the show.
It is a pleasure to be here with you, Dan. Thank you.
Awesome. Can't wait for the discussion. Joy, I'm thrilled you're joining me on the show today because I think we're going to get under the bonnet of something that is really fundamental to the mindset and psychological impacts that affect us in retirement, and that is spending money in a way that we are going to lay on the couch, because I think this spending money thing is probably rooted more in psychology than numbers, for in terms of what we give it credit to do. Is just share your amazing journey with the listeners, because how your journey has taken you from the couch, as I said, to the world of money. It'd be amazing just to kind of hear that from you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and something that really stood out to me after a decade of sitting behind closed doors with bright, curious, really successful people who were having conversations with me that they weren't having with anyone else, is that time and time again, it, regardless of what originally brought someone into therapy, money somehow often became part of the picture. And I don't think we should really be surprised by that, because money is inextricably linked to so many aspects of our lives, either directly or indirectly. And we attach so much meaning to it. Money is about identity. It's about purpose. It's about our relationship with work. It's about power and control, status, significance, legacy. So I had an appreciation that money, there aren't a lot of spaces for people to talk about this. And one of my colleagues who I worked with at a group practice had actually gone to graduate school with Daniel Crosby. And he said, you remind me of this guy that I went to school with. And I connected with Daniel, and we just hit it off from the start. And he said, there are not a lot of psychologists in this space right now, and certainly not a lot of female voices. So there's room in the finance industry if you want to do some work. So it has been a joy for me I continue to have a private clinical practice, but it has been a joy for me to step into the world of finance and go on to co-found Shaping Wealth with my partners, Brian Portnoy and Neil Beige, which I know have had great conversations with you for your audience. And I really love the work that I'm doing around the psychology of money, really training and equipping advisors now, because advisors are taught
Fantastic.
to manage money.
I can't
they are not
put into words the impact
they don't
that
receive the
Shaping
same
Wealth
kind of
has
training
had on me. I think
around managing the human side of money.
The
And at the
ability
end of the
to
day,
think
that's
about more
what
deeply
someone's
the human
financial
side of
life
money is
all
a
about.
crucial part of our role as financial planners. But to not make you blush here, but your impact on me and what you've done in terms of the kind of money stories and how you start thinking about your relationship with money, and how your phrase around money is the lightning rod of emotions, right? It's kind of what you said there. So I want to thank you for making that jump, because what you're giving back to our profession is profound, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that flourishes over the coming years. So thank you for that. No. Perfect. So what I really want to touch on is some things that you've been talking about quite a bit over the last few months. And that is something that absolutely applies
Oh,
to
thank
this
you.
human versus
It's an honor
retirement
and a
battle.
privilege to get to walk
And
alongside people like yourself.
I've said before in previous podcast episodes, this wonderful made up thing called retirement that we're trying to get our heads around is a massive emotional challenge for everybody to undertake. I think people underappreciate the emotional challenge. But what I'm going to dive into really is around the topic of spending money, because it's one that I think is obvious. We're going to go into retirement and start spending, but one we are, I think, massively ill-equipped to do well. So, Joy, why do you think?
Well, I think there are multiple reasons. When we look at the psychology of spending, I'm really glad you're bringing up this topic, because I think often there's so much, when we talk about financial well being, there's so much of a focus on, I need to spend responsibly and I need to focus on saving. I need more money for tomorrow. So that is the focus and the goal. And in some way, that is important. But for some people, that can actually get in the way of healthy spending. Sometimes we don't even put those two words together. But at the end of the day, we are all humans. We don't do balance real well. We like to think, feel, and act in extremes. And I think that plays out a lot with someone's financial life, particularly when we're looking at this dimension of money life spending. Now, there are a few reasons that can really make it difficult for someone. I think one that I see again and again is if someone has significant financial anxiety, and sometimes that anxiety is linked to a history of financial trauma. So if you've had an experience of scarcity or loss in the past, that burns very deep into your psyche. And then sometimes it is almost as though when we've experienced some kind of trauma, our brain later on can't hit refresh and give our heart the message that old threats are no longer exist. I am in a new environment.
So I think it's
I
really
have a
important
different
to
set of
just hang on
resources
that point,
available
because
to me.
like
So
any,
just because
I
someone
suppose, like any
has more
anxiety or
money
trauma in
or is
life, we
in a
probably have
more
to go
stable
backwards to move
place
forwards.
doesn't
So
mean
I
it is
think,
going to be
I think
easier for them to
it's
spend
vital
money, because
that we have to look at our
oftentimes
past
that old
experiences to be
fear
able to feel like we
then
can equip
then
ourselves
really drives and
to
determines what
be
they
able to be
ultimately choose
free
to do.
to
So I
spend
think
money.
that
There's, and
first
I
and
come across it
foremost
with a lot of
is
people I
one
work
of the
with,
leading
when there is some
causes.
anxiety around spending, and there is some deep rooted but often quite easy to get to problems that you can see. It's often a parent or a grandparent or a friend that they saw, spent wildly and run out of money early, and those stay with us, right, for a long time.
Yes, and you bring up something really interesting, this idea of what was modeled to us. And if we think about early experiences, because our early experiences in life, they don't determine who we become, but they really set the table for so many things in our lives. And one of those things is what is modeled to us and what we learn experientially. But when we focus on what someone's financial role models have been, with our role models, we tend to do one of two things. We either see something in someone and we decide, okay, either consciously or unconsciously, that's what I'm going to do. So then we just kind of copy paste and carry that forward. Or we have a really strong emotional experience with someone and we decide that is not who I want to be. I will not repeat that. So then we course correct in the opposite direction. So your
Hugely
example
interesting.
of,
I don't think
maybe
we give
I
ourselves
had an
enough
experience
space
with a
to
caregiver
think
who
about
was
this before
very
we push
financially
that retirement button.
irresponsible, and I didn't
I
know where
think the
the next
space to
meal
think
was
about
going
and
to come
understand is
from.
often done
And I
maybe
wanted
too
to make
late.
sure that that was
We might
never
be a
going to
couple of
happen
years
to
in,
me, and
2, 3
certainly
years
never
in,
going to happen
worrying
to
about
my
why things are
child.
happening. I think,
So I'm
a lot of
going
the
to make
work that
sure
I
that
do
I'm
and
squared
that
away.
you guys
I
at
think
Shaping Wealth are trying to do is
humans
have
tend to fall
these
on one of those two
conversations in
sides
a better,
of
more
those
profound place
experiences
within
with
the
role
life,
models.
within the client's life and in their journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say it's never going to be too late. It is so easy for us to look back and say, oh, if only I had had this insight earlier, if only I would have started sooner. I think it's really important for us to focus on, know what I have right now. So, what is the best next step right now rather than getting stuck
What
in
an
what we
unbelievable
could have
point.
done
I've
in
said
the
it before in
past?
previous
Because I
podcast
think so
episodes, but there's a
much
wonderful button that allows
it's
us to
really
rewind
important
30 seconds.
in when we are
Pause this,
trying to
click the
chart a
rewind,
path toward
everyone, and listen
financial
to that sentence
well-being
over and over, because I think
to
that's some
really
wisdom being dropped
separate
right there.
what we
Thank you.
can control with
That's
what we
unbelievable.
can't control.
Do you know what? From an
And
anxiety
what we
point of view,
can't
I think
control
it
is
falls through to
everything in the rear view
what I
mirror.
think is
What
one
we
of the
can
major challenges that I really
control
want to touch on with you. And
is
this it's
our
this kind of
thoughts and our
inclination
actions
towards
today.
certainty. So for our career, we have had certainty around to a large degree, certainty around a paycheck, certainty around a regular income coming into our life that we know if we spend is going to be replaced the next month. So we absolutely challenge that certainty when we leave work. But I think you've done some work on a topic I discuss with a lot of people, and that's this paycheck anxiety. So, we're certain for this, but now the paycheck's gone, that comfort blanket's been ripped away from us. I'd love to touch on that with you.
Absolutely. So I think another thing that makes it very difficult for people to spend money, particularly when it comes to this huge life transition and identity transition of retirement, is making the shift from accumulation to decumulation. Now, for so long, for decades, you have a person who has been so focused on saving for tomorrow, saving for tomorrow, saving for tomorrow. And then it is as though, okay, now what do I do when that tomorrow that I've been saving for is here. It's not realistic for us to expect someone to mentally flip a switch and emotionally and behaviorally be like, oh, now we just do something different. That's not how any of us are wired to work. So I think we really have to have a lot of empathy about how challenging that shift can be. And there is something that creates a real sense of security for someone if they see a number continue to go up. But when that number starts to go down, which at some point it ultimately needs to, because that's what that money is there for, that can be very anxiety provoking. Because I think another dimension that makes this challenging for people during retirement is, well, what if I outlive my money? So I need to wait because I don't know how much time I have left. But here's the thing, Dan. None of us know how much time we have left. It doesn't matter the age of any of your listeners today. And there's this,
I think
really
I've said it before. I think if we all knew the day we were not going to be here, this would be a very simple maths equation on an Excel spreadsheet, and you wouldn't, it would be quite an easy thing to do. But as you said, we don't know the day that we're going to pass away,
responsible, and holding in mind tomorrow.
We have to take advantage of a period in our lives where we then get time on our side.
Our current selves and our future selves. That's a really
as good as it's going to be.
Challenging thing to psychologically navigate.
Kind of phrased as your go-go years, these kind of those 10 years
now it's time
immediately
to start
after you've
what I have been
defined what your retirement looks like. You've made a step back from work. It doesn't mean you stop work full time and everything that we've talked about, retaining purpose and everything, but that's crucial. If you don't spend your money in those 10 years on what's most important to you, you're going to get to a point where you can't spend it on those things, because again, we're naturally, whether it's physically, mentally, we're naturally going to decline over time. There are exceptions to the rule, but that's absolutely going to happen. So I think it's hugely important that we can put ourselves in a position, as you said, to feel free to spend it up front, but also have some comfort that that long-term burdens are taken care of.
Yeah. And I think what you raised something really important. And this is why I think it is really, really useful for us to think about well-being holistically. We aren't just talking about financial well-being. We're talking about emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, and physical well-being. Because another important part of this decision-making process and conversation is the idea of longevity and health span. So while you have those resources available, you also want to have the physical strength to enjoy what you've worked for. And I think this is one of those things that we need to start paying attention to much earlier on. Because what happens if you have neglected your physical health so that you can work yourself to the bone and you've been burnt out to see that number be as big as possible, but then you're broken and exhausted and sick as soon as you say, okay, I'm signing out at the office for the last time. That doesn't work out well. if you, during this time of accumulation, have managed to neglect your relationships so that you can be myopically focused on being financially successful in your job,
real retirement planning
then
is
who do you
way
have
beyond
to
numbers.
enjoy this money with?
Way beyond numbers.
What is,
and I
is
think
your
that actually
partner
there's
a
two
stranger
phrases
to
or numbers
you?
I think that you bring up.
What are your
It's lifespan
relationships
is
with
very
your
different to
kids
health
like?
span. And it's that, lifespan
As
in
we are
retirement might
talking
be
about
30 plus
well-being,
years.
we
Health
have
span
to
might
be
only
holding
be
in
half of that.
mind each of
So
these
how do
dimensions,
we go through those two
because
phases? And
really flourishing,
I think people often
enjoying
find
our
that it's a
lives,
challenge to put
all of
themselves
these
in a
things need
position
to
to
be
feel
in
free
order
enough to take advantage
for
of health
us
span,
to really do that.
which is a little bit here. And if I ask you, what's at stake if we don't spend money? I think that's something to really think about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. I think it's an important question. If we don't spend money, I think there's a lot to be said for one, how does that impact your relationships? Because when someone is reticent to spend the resources that they have available to them, that can create a lot of angst and frustration for the people around them. Now, if those people aren't able to empathize and really take perspective and appreciate, okay, there are deeper things, like we talked about the financial anxiety, maybe some of that trauma that drives someone to really struggle to part with their money, even when the math tells us that's not necessary. That can create a lot of tension. I think there's so much missed opportunity for creating memories, connections, experiences. There's missed opportunity for impact. Because when we're talking about spending money, it doesn't mean you need to make a long list of things that are just for you. Part of the joy of working and saving is so that you can spend and see your money have a positive impact
I
in the
think
world on
it's,
things that are important to
and the
you,
work
that
that
you
you guys do at
value.
Shaping Wealth touches on
And
the
I think it's really
neuroscience
sad
of
that
this, but
someone
it's
would
now
want to or
all
be
the
willing to
research
forfeit
that's put in front of
that
us that
impact as
shows
well.
us the deep joy
And
that
there are
giving
some
our money
people,
away
Dan,
and spending our
who
money on
are
causes,
unwilling because the
gives
anxiety
us.
is so
Um,
crippling.
I
They
think is
won't
now
even
it
spend
now needs
money
to
on
be
things that
brought to the
they
forefront
really
of these
need.
conversations
They may
to
not
go, if we align our purpose
permit
and our money with
themselves
what's
to
most
buy some
important,
of those things
that
that
doesn't mean we're going and buy
may
Ferraris
then
or we
go
turn
on
left on a
to
plane
impact
or anything like
physical
that.
health,
It's about
emotional health.
spending your money on what gives
And
you deep
in doing
joy, which
so,
for some
then they
people,
are
it's big, shiny
creating
things.
their
For
own
most people,
limits.
it's actually, it's, it's less than that. And actually, for a lot of people, when you have those conversations, that thing of enough, how much money is enough, is a lot less than what people think. Because actually, deep down, what they do want to spend their time and money on actually isn't those things that give us that short-term little hit of dopamine. So I think I think one of the things also to really touch on is I think the identity and connection that money gives us, right? And I think it's, I think the origins of our money, and we talked about experiences earlier on, but actually the origins of the money often has a significant impact on the feelings that we have towards that money, that then has another impact on us spending it. And I've got a personal story to share with this. Really, my wife's mum passed away 14 years ago. My wife was pregnant with our first, 4 months pregnant with our first, when her mum passed away pretty suddenly. But her mum left her £10,000 of money. Now, that money is still sitting in my wife's bank account 14 years later, because there is an attachment to that money that isn't hers, it's her mum's. And she really emotionally struggles to think about spending that. And we're trying to reframe that in a way that says, actually, we're going to spend it on something as an experience for us as a family that your mum would love, to have given. But I'd love your take on that, because I think it's something that happens a lot. Money that's been left or inherited or got through other means.
Yes. So that story beautifully illustrates and very powerfully illustrates that when there is an emotional or relational connection to an asset, that is going to impact how we treat it, or if it is liquid, how we spend it. There, for your wife, for other people in that situation, that there's a connection to someone very important. And I think sometimes when there is an inheritance, or, I work with people who maybe they've gotten a large sum of money as a life insurance policy. That is very emotionally charged money. And to do something with that for some people is another layer of acknowledging and accepting a new and very painful reality, which is a life without that person. And I think another story that people tell themselves about these assets that are connected to people are, well, if I spend all of this, that's all I have left of that person. And if this is gone, then what? So I think when there's a friend, family member, or client who's really struggling to let go of something, really having an appreciation
I talk about that a lot when we build these,
connection
cash flow plans. That I'm very
and
I'm very
this happens
purposeful
with
when I
people's
say they're wrong the
houses.
moment they're
The
created,
way
because they're full
we
of assumptions about the
value
future,
a
and I'm not
childhood
very good at
home that we
telling the
grew
future.
up in,
Um,
that had
but
our memories. The
people go, well, don't
way
worry, because I'll downsize or
family
right size my house.
values the
And
home
I think
that
the phrase I
they
use
brought
is
their
like, "Are you
babies
happy to
home from
sell
the
those memories
hospital
then?"
in is very different
And I think
than
because
if
ultimately, I
someone
think
is
again, and there's a
just
load of
doing
research
real
done on
estate
this
on the side and
around
it is a house
how
they've never lived in. There's no emotional
a sale of
attachment.
a sale of a
So
property at some point
all
will
of
release
those
capital.
human
However,
experiences
it gets to the point
become
these
part
people
of
are
the
going to
financial
make that
calculus
transaction,
that can make it
and
a
they
little bit
can't, the
harder
pictures on
to
the
let
wall
something
and
go.
the stain on the carpet, and it's memories, and you're selling memories, and they really struggle to bring themselves to do that. And I've heard stories of where the children have then got involved and gone, oh, it's a shame you're selling this, mum or dad, because we've got so many memories in here. So again, it's, it's making sure that these things are talked about, because I think if you're, again, if your retirement plan says that you're going to run out of liquid money at age 75, but don't worry, I'm going to sell my house and release some capital. I don't think we can underappreciate how difficult that plan would be to execute. Mm.
Yes. And I think it's really important that we don't, if someone is struggling, that we aren't saying, well, you're just being irrational, or you're being emotional about this,
Mm.
and using that label emotional as though
So
it's something negative.
if we could
No,
cover off
that
for a
person
couple
is
of
having a
minutes,
very human
how can
reaction that
we
almost all
start
of
to
us
think about,
would.
or how can we start to
And that
help
doesn't mean
people
something is wrong or right. It
spend their
just
money?
means
What
our
are some
head and our
things that we
heart
can start
make the human
to really
experience of
to really
money
start to think
hard
about,
sometimes. And
as we
that's
approach
when
these
we need
decisions?
people to come alongside of us, sometimes with less attachment, a different perspective, to give us, to speak some truth or some wisdom into our situation. But we can't take that in if someone is critical or using language that is in some ways going to be shameful of the reaction someone is having. I think one of the first places we need to start is with validation and acknowledgement that for some people, this is very difficult. And there are reasons that it is difficult. It isn't that person being difficult, it is what has brought them to where they are today in their money story that is making it a little bit hard. There's so much power when we lead with validation. And we can be then curious about, okay, what's making this difficult? Have someone verbalize and articulate what their fears are. And then after you've heard some of those concerns, maybe you can speak to them. And I think this is where it's so useful to have an advisor who can help someone run the math, offer the support. I think it's really useful for people who spending money is almost this foreign concept. We talk about that, this idea of that switch from accumulation to decumulation. It is hard when something has been adaptive, has been important, and has been very positively reinforced over and over and over again in our lives to do something different. So I sometimes find with advisors, it can be useful to have someone practice doing something different. So practice, work out with an advisor. Okay, what is a discretionary amount of money that is not going to hurt you financially that you can go ahead and practice using? And I think we need to start that conversation with some coaching that this is going to feel uncomfortable, not because it's wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. And that is a human reaction to anything that is new and against what our habitual bent is. And when it comes to, okay, well, what do I do with this? Some people, they don't even know where to start. Like, what do I do with this? if you can help someone, and this is where conversations about values are so important, like paint a picture of what an abundant life looks like and means to you. And then take some specifics out of that and use that practice pot of money to go out and do some of those things. And I think people are much more likely and willing to do things that are new, sometimes when we frame it as an experiment. Okay, just bear with me. You can say, bear with me. Let's try this for a month, for 6 months. We can come back. You can always go back. At the end of the day, you leave my office and you run your life. But you've hired me to help you. And I really believe that this is the best shot we've got right now to really help you up level your financial well-being. So why don't we try this? Run some experiments, see and pay attention, self-observe. Okay, what are you thinking? What are you feeling before, during, after? And then let's come back and have a conversation about how this went.
I absolutely love
what
that.
What happened when you did something
I've
different?
written some notes. That's fantastic.
I think one of the things for me, I touch on very briefly before we start to wrap up, the status quo, and that is all
you mentioned about this experiment, experiment
most people
of buckets of money, effectively, and I think labeling money, as much as we talked about my wife's example, and that money had a label on it,
so much
that was, that prevented her from feeling free to spend. I think you can do the opposite. I think you can label money that allows you to feel free to spend. So, it's the I don't give a damn fund, that kind of thing. And people put swear words on those bucket labels.
Where we are naturally going to recoil
my daughter's wedding fund.
It's
the trip, wedding anniversary fund. I think as you said, to label them, to give them a meaning and a purpose, allows us to feel that that's what it's for. And I often find that those strategies with people I work with do work on a number of occasions. They won't work for everybody, but they do. There's definitely something in there.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And I think this highlights.
So, Joy, as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you to sit on the couch, and I'm going to ask you a few questions, if I may.
Talking about biases, as though they are all
I'm really
bad.
curious
to
understand
and
what
get rid of. We aren't going to get rid of our biases. We need to be aware of them.
Kind of brackets.
But some biases, yes, they cause us to really get in our own way. But some of these mental quirks can really help us. And mental accounting is one of those things that if we create that mental label and bucket in our mind and say, I need to do this with this money, that can be really powerful for people. I hope that my retirement looks not super dissimilar to the way I live my life today. I always want to be engaged in work, for me, my relationship with work, it's not just about having a job. It's about purpose and meaning and having an identity. We don't have to be paid for our work, but it's being anchored and tethered to something bigger than myself, where I'm using and being a
To
good
me,
steward of
that doesn't
the
sound like how we've
resources,
defined
of the
retirement, does
training,
it?
of the life
That sounds amazing.
experiences
That sounds
I've
like a
had. So,
continuation of
so
life on your
using that,
terms,
continuing
which
to
I
use my
think is a lesson
brain,
for everyone to learn.
and
So
really creating and
go for it.
maximizing, continuing to make memories as much as possible with those people in my inner circle who are the most important to me. So family, close friends, continuing to care for myself physically, continuing to be connected to and actively contributing to a spiritual community. All of those things are very, very important to me as I think about, okay, what does life look like in the after? No, you just said something, if I can jump in, you just said something so important. Life on your terms. I think it serves so many people to do work, to do their own work in psychotherapy and whatever space you need to really figure out, what does life on your terms mean? What does that look like for you? And that's something that I've worked very hard to achieve and create in my own life, and that requires boundaries. It requires intention. It has required a lot of sacrifice during certain periods, and but lots of people spend their life waiting, and I think some of that is because it takes a lot of courage to live life on your terms, because some of that is you need to stop playing some silly status games. You need to stop looking around at everyone else saying, well, if they're doing this, maybe I should be doing that. And if I make this choice, what is someone going to think about that? I
Powerful. Thank you
knew
for
and
opening up.
accepted a
That
long time
was
ago, whatever my
so
life
powerful.
choices are, as a parent, as a
Yeah, that needs some
professional,
space.
people are going to have
Thank
all
you.
kinds of thoughts and opinions about
So
them.
look,
And
I'm sitting in front of you.
my
I'm
life, for
55.
all of
I've
us,
established
whatever
that I've
we
got
choose,
enough
there are going to
money,
be
whatever that
more
looks like
people
for
who are
this
doing
retirement that I
something
desire.
different.
What would
And
be
those are the
your
people
number
who
one
often
tip
are the most
for a
vocal.
happy, healthy, and
But at
wealthy
the end of the
retirement?
day, I am the only one who has to live the rest of my life with the natural consequences of my life choices. So I know I have nothing to defend or explain to anyone. I need to focus on running my race. And there's something so liberating and so freeing. People should not wait until their 60s to start living like that. Be intentional about investing in your relationships and be taking care of your body. Because going back to what I said earlier, you what is the state of your connections with the people around you? Are you sacrificing the people in your life for the way you are choosing to work? That is not going to end well for you. And if you are not taking care of your body with fueling it properly, moving consistently, find something you enjoy to do to get your heart rate up, and really not neglecting your sleep, because sleep is this huge amplifier. Good sleep will make everything better.
I could not
Bad
agree with you
sleep
more.
is going to make
Could not agree with you more.
everything harder. So those 3 areas: eat,
So
sleep,
when it comes
move,
to this human
be
versus
bringing
retirement
intention to
face-off
those
that
every
we
day,
have,
so
you know, the
that
brain
when
versus
you do
retirement,
step back
is there anything that
from
I've
your
not
job,
asked you that I should have
that
done?
you are strong
Or do you
enough
think that we've
to
covered
step
everything?
in to whatever you want to do, and that you have
Me
people
too. It's been
around
amazing.
you and who want
So,
to
Joy, people
enjoy
can
it with you.
find you on social media,
Because
on
all the
Twitter
money in the
and
world, if you
LinkedIn,
are lonely
and I will
or if
put
you are
with
sick,
put your
is going to be pretty
handles. Is that the
miserable.
right word? I'm
And
not.
money
I will
is
put that
not
in the
going
show notes,
to
and I
buy you better
highly
relationships
recommend
when you retire.
connecting
And
with
no
and
amount of
following
money is
Joy,
going to
because she
buy you
shares
better
this
health
stuff
because of the
on
choices
a
you
daily
made
basis.
in
And
the
actually her
lifetime leading
newsletter,
up
Finding
to
Joy,
that
which
time
again
period.
I highly recommend, is one that I cannot wait to drop in my inbox all of the time. So I'll put links to that onto the show notes. But Joy, look, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much for your time. This has been such an amazing conversation.
We took this conversation
I
today,
really,
Dan.
really appreciate that. And thank you all for listening to the Humans versus Retirement podcast.
Yes.
It's been an
Yes.